Imagine this: you're living your life, and everything seems pretty normal. You've got relationships, maybe a job, hobbies and dreams, but then, little by little, you start feeling off. Maybe it's your partner, your friend, or even a family member. At first, they seem charming, attentive, and even loving. But over time, strange things happen. You're more anxious, second-guessing yourself, doubting your decisions, and wondering why you're suddenly feeling so powerless. But here's the twist: it's not just happening by accident. You're being controlled, and the person doing it, a narcissist. In this video, we're going to dive deep into the 10 most dangerous ways narcissists control you, and trust me, 99.9% of people don't even realize it's happening to them. By the end of this, you'll not only understand the exact tactics narcissists use, but also how to break free from their grip. This isn't just about learning psychology, it's about reclaiming your life. Let's get started. First, let's talk about isolation. Narcissists know that to control you, they need to cut you off from your support system. Friends, family, co-workers, anyone who might offer you a reality check. But here's the thing, they don't do it outright. They're not going to say, "Hey, stop talking to your best friend." Instead, they'll subtly plant seeds of doubt. They might say, "I don't think your friend really likes me," or "Your family doesn't really understand us." Over time, these comments become more frequent, and before you know it, you start cutting people out of your life because you think it's your idea. They'll frame it as protecting the relationship, but in reality, they're isolating you so that you become emotionally dependent on them. Click subscribe to this channel to get more insights into human psychology. This ties into dependency, the second dangerous tactic. Narcissists want you to rely on them for everything: emotional support, validation, even basic decisions. They'll make you feel like you can't trust your own judgment. You'll hear things like, "I know what's best for you," or "You're too emotional to make this decision." The goal is to make you feel incompetent, so you turn to them for guidance. In psychology, this is known as learned helplessness. It's when someone feels powerless to change their situation because they've been conditioned to believe they have no control. A famous experiment by Martin Seligman demonstrated this with dogs. After being subjected to unavoidable shocks, the dogs stopped trying to escape even when they later had the opportunity to do so. The same thing happens in relationships with narcissists. You stop trying to assert yourself because you've been convinced that you're incapable of making good choices. Now, let's move on to emotional manipulation. Narcissists are masters at playing with your emotions. They'll use guilt, shame, and fear to keep you in line. One minute, they'll make you feel like you're the most important person in the world, and the next, they'll tear you down. It's like being on an emotional roller coaster, and it keeps you hooked. Why? Because your brain becomes addicted to the highs and lows. In fact, research shows that intermittent reinforcement, when rewards are given out unpredictably, creates a stronger emotional attachment than consistent rewards. It's the same reason people get addicted to gambling. They're always chasing that next win, even if it rarely comes. Narcissists use this to keep you emotionally invested in the relationship, even when it's toxic. Another dangerous tactic is gaslighting. This is when they make you question your own reality. They'll deny things they've said or done, twist the truth, and insist that your memory is faulty. Over time, you start doubting your own perceptions. You think, "Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I did imagine that." Gaslighting is so effective because it erodes your sense of self. You stop trusting your own thoughts and feelings, which makes you even more dependent on the narcissist for validation. But it doesn't stop there. Narcissists also use triangulation to control you. This is when they bring a third person into the dynamic to create jealousy or competition. It could be an ex, a friend, or even a family member. They'll say things like, "So-and-so would never treat me this way," or "I should have stayed with my ex. They understood me better." The goal is to make you feel insecure and constantly striving for their approval. Triangulation taps into our deep-seated fear of rejection. Psychologically, we're wired to seek connection and belonging, and when we feel like we're being replaced or compared unfavorably to someone else, it triggers anxiety and insecurity. Narcissists exploit this fear to maintain control. Speaking of insecurity, let's talk about projection. Narcissists are experts at accusing you of the very things they're guilty of. If they're cheating, they'll accuse you of being unfaithful. If they're lying, they'll say you're the dishonest one. Projection serves two purposes. It deflects blame away from them and puts you on the defensive. You end up spending so much time trying to prove you're not what they say you are that you don't even realize they're the ones actually doing it. This tactic is a classic defense mechanism in psychology. By projecting their flaws onto you, narcissists protect their fragile egos from facing their own shortcomings. Let's pause for a second and ask a deeper question. Have you ever felt like you were constantly walking on eggshells around someone, unsure of when they'd explode or turn on you? If so, you've likely experienced the next tactic: emotional volatility. Narcissists use their unpredictable moods to keep you off balance. One minute, they're calm and charming, and the next, they're angry, distant, or cold. This creates an environment of fear and anxiety where you're always on edge, trying to avoid triggering their wrath. In psychology, we call this intermittent punishment. The random nature of their outbursts keeps you in a state of hypervigilance. You're constantly trying to anticipate their needs and avoid conflict, which gives them even more control over your behavior. But wait, there's more. Narcissists also use love bombing as a form of control. At the beginning of the relationship, they'll shower you with affection, gifts, and attention. You feel like you found your soulmate. But this isn't genuine love. It's a manipulation tactic designed to get you hooked. Once you're emotionally invested, they start pulling back, leaving you confused and desperate for the relationship to return to how it was in the beginning. Love bombing creates an emotional dependency where you're constantly chasing that initial high, even when the narcissist starts treating you poorly. Now, let's talk about control through finances. Narcissists often use money as a way to exert power. They might control the household finances, give you an allowance, or make you feel guilty for spending money on yourself. This financial control makes it harder for you to leave the relationship, especially if you're financially dependent on them. In psychology, we call this economic abuse, a form of coercive control where the abuser uses money to trap you in the relationship. It's incredibly effective because it limits your independence and options for escape. The final tactic we'll discuss is future faking. This is when a narcissist makes grand promises about the future to keep you invested in the relationship. They'll talk about getting married, having kids, or traveling the world together, but these promises never materialize. Future faking is a way to keep you hooked, always believing that things will get better. It's a form of delayed gratification where they dangle the carrot of a perfect future just out of reach, keeping you in the relationship even when it's not fulfilling. So, we've covered the 10 most dangerous ways narcissists control you: isolation, dependency, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, triangulation, projection, emotional volatility, love bombing, financial control, and future faking. These tactics are incredibly powerful because they work on both a psychological and emotional level. They make you doubt yourself, feel insecure, and become dependent on the narcissist for validation and support. But here's the thing: now that you know their tactics, you can start to take back control. The first step is awareness. Recognize these behaviors for what they are: manipulation. Once you can see the game they're playing, you can stop engaging in it. Set boundaries. Narcissists hate boundaries because they limit their ability to control you. And most importantly, surround yourself with a support system. Narcissists isolate you for a reason, because they know that when you have people in your corner, you're stronger. Now that you've recognized the 10 key tactics narcissists use to control you, let's dive deeper into how each of these methods works psychologically, and more importantly, how you can break free from them. We're going to explore the psychology behind these manipulations in even more detail, and I'll share some practical strategies you can use to protect yourself, rebuild your sense of self, and regain control of your life. This part is crucial because knowledge alone isn't enough. You need to understand how to put that knowledge into action. Let's start with isolation, which is often one of the first steps narcissists take to gain control. Isolation works because humans are inherently social creatures. Studies in psychology, like Harry Harlow's famous research with rhesus monkeys, show just how devastating social isolation can be. In Harlow's experiments, baby monkeys were separated from their mothers and deprived of social contact. The results were heartbreaking. These monkeys became emotionally disturbed, unable to form healthy relationships later in life. While this is an extreme example, it highlights how deeply we depend on social connections for our emotional well-being. Narcissists exploit this dependency by cutting you off from your social support network, leaving you more vulnerable to their control. So, how do you fight back against isolation? The first step is to reconnect. This might seem obvious, but it's harder than it sounds, especially if you've been isolated for a long time. Narcissists are skilled at convincing you that your friends and family don't care about you, or that they're the problem. You may have distanced yourself from people who would have otherwise offered support. Start by reaching out to those you've lost touch with. Even if it feels awkward or uncomfortable, explain what's been going on and let them know you need their help. True friends and family will understand and be there for you. If you feel too isolated to reach out to people you know, consider joining a support group for survivors of narcissistic abuse. Being around others who've experienced similar situations can be incredibly validating and empowering. Next, let's talk about emotional manipulation and how it exploits your deepest insecurities. Narcissists are experts at finding your emotional weak spots and using them to control you. For example, if you have a fear of abandonment, they'll play on that fear by threatening to leave or by making you feel like you're not good enough to keep them around. This constant emotional push and pull creates an addictive cycle of highs and lows. Think of it like a drug. When they give you attention and affection, it's a dopamine rush. But when they withdraw or criticize you, it triggers anxiety and desperation, making you crave their approval even more. The key to breaking free from this cycle is to recognize the pattern. Narcissists thrive on keeping you emotionally off balance, but once you start seeing their behavior for what it is, manipulation, you can begin to detach emotionally. One practical strategy is to practice emotional detachment. This doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent, but rather learning to observe your emotions without letting them control your actions. When the narcissist tries to provoke you, take a step back and ask yourself, what are they trying to achieve by making me feel this way? How can I respond in a way that doesn't feed into their manipulation? Over time, this practice will help you regain control over your emotional responses. Now, let's dive into gaslighting. Gaslighting is one of the most dangerous forms of manipulation because it makes you doubt your own sanity. The narcissist will deny things they've said or done, twist the truth, and make you feel like you're the one who's confused or irrational. This tactic is particularly effective because it exploits a psychological phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance occurs when we hold two conflicting beliefs or ideas, and it creates a sense of discomfort. In the case of gaslighting, you believe one thing based on your own experiences, e.g., I know they said that hurtful thing, but the narcissist denies it, creating a conflict in your mind. To resolve this discomfort, many people start to question their own memories or perceptions. So, how do you fight back against gaslighting? One powerful tool is to document everything. Keep a journal of the conversations and incidents where you feel gaslighted. Write down what was said, how you felt, and any inconsistencies you notice. This serves two purposes. First, it gives you a concrete record to refer back to when the narcissist tries to deny or twist the truth. Second, it helps you strengthen your own sense of reality. The act of writing things down reinforces your perception of events and makes it harder for the narcissist to manipulate your memory. Additionally, don't be afraid to trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Narcissists are skilled at making you doubt yourself, but deep down you know when something is wrong. Trust that inner voice. Let's move on to triangulation, which is a particularly insidious form of manipulation. By pulling a third person into the dynamic, whether it's an ex, a friend, or even a family member, the narcissist creates tension and insecurity. They'll compare you to this other person, making you feel like you're not good enough. This taps into our natural tendency to compare ourselves to others, a phenomenon known as social comparison theory. According to social psychologist Leon Festinger, we constantly evaluate our own worth by comparing ourselves to those around us. Narcissists exploit this tendency by making you feel like you're in competition with someone else for their love or approval. Now, let's talk about projection. This is when the narcissist accuses you of the very things they're guilty of. If they're lying, they'll accuse you of being dishonest. If they're emotionally unavailable, they'll claim you're the one who's distant. This tactic works because it puts you on the defensive. Instead of questioning their behavior, you start questioning your own. It also creates confusion, which is exactly what the narcissist wants. When you're constantly defending yourself, you're too distracted to see what's really going on. The key to dealing with projection is to stay grounded in your own truth. When the narcissist accuses you of something, take a moment to reflect. Ask yourself, is this accusation based in reality, or is it a reflection of their own behavior? More often than not, you'll realize that they're projecting their own guilt or insecurity onto you. Don't fall into the trap of defending yourself against every accusation. Instead, calmly state your truth and move on. The more you engage in their accusations, the more power you give them. Finally, let's revisit love bombing. At the beginning of the relationship, the narcissist showers you with affection, attention, and gifts, making you feel like you found the perfect partner. But this intense affection isn't about love, it's about control. Once you're hooked, the narcissist starts pulling back, leaving you chasing after the affection that once came so easily. This creates a cycle of emotional dependence, where you're constantly trying to get back to the honeymoon phase. The antidote to love bombing is to recognize the pattern and understand that real love isn't about grand gestures or intense highs. Healthy relationships are steady, consistent, and based on mutual respect and trust. If someone is overwhelming you with affection too quickly, take a step back and assess the situation. Are they genuinely interested in getting to know you? Or are they trying to win you over with flashy displays of affection? Don't mistake intensity for intimacy. Healthy relationships take time to build, and love bombing is a red flag that should not be ignored. At this point, you're probably starting to see how all of these tactics — isolation, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, triangulation, projection, and love bombing — work together to create a web of control. Narcissists use these methods to keep you off balance, dependent, and emotionally vulnerable. But here's the good news: once you understand their tactics, you can start to break free. Awesome. Let's dive into the final part of this journey. Now that we've uncovered how narcissists use isolation, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, triangulation, projection, and love bombing, it's time to tackle the remaining tactics of control, particularly the ones that are the hardest to recognize because they often look like love, concern, or even protection. These tactics are dangerous because they masquerade as caring behaviors, making it more difficult for you to see them for what they really are: manipulation and control. Let's start with financial control. This is one of the more practical, but often overlooked, ways narcissists can exert power over you. Financial control can take many forms: preventing you from working, controlling your access to money, giving you an allowance, or making you feel guilty for spending money on yourself. The goal here is to make you financially dependent on them, so leaving the relationship becomes not just emotionally difficult, but practically impossible. The narcissist might say, "I'll take care of everything so you don't have to worry," and this can feel like love or protection. But over time, this dynamic shifts into a form of control, where you're left without the resources to make independent decisions. In psychology, this type of behavior is called economic abuse, and it's a powerful form of coercion. Studies show that financial dependency is one of the main reasons people stay in abusive relationships. The abuser knows that if you don't have access to money, your options for escape are limited. If you find yourself in this situation, it's crucial to start rebuilding your financial independence, even if it's in small steps. Open a separate bank account, start saving money, and look for ways to generate your own income, even if it's just a side hustle. Financial independence is a key factor in regaining control over your life. Next up is future faking. This is when the narcissist makes grand promises about the future to keep you invested in the relationship. They'll talk about marriage, children, buying a house together, or going on extravagant trips, but these promises never materialize. It's all a tactic to keep you hooked, always believing that things will get better someday. Future faking works because it plays on the natural human tendency to delay gratification. We're wired to work toward long-term rewards, and narcissists manipulate this instinct by dangling the prospect of a perfect future just out of reach. This tactic is particularly dangerous because it creates cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort that arises when your current reality doesn't match the future you've been promised. You think to yourself, "Things are bad now, but they'll get better once we get married, once we have kids, once we move into that dream house." The problem is, that future never comes, and in the meantime, you're stuck in a relationship that isn't fulfilling your needs. And to break free from future faking, you need to focus on the here and now. Ask yourself, is this relationship making me happy today? Are my needs being met now? Don't let the promise of a better future keep you trapped in a toxic present. Now, let's talk about blame shifting. Narcissists rarely take responsibility for their actions. Instead, they'll find a way to make everything your fault. If they hurt your feelings, it's because you're too sensitive. If they cheat, it's because you weren't giving them enough attention. This constant blame shifting erodes your self-esteem because you start to believe that you're the problem. Over time, you internalize their criticisms, and this is where it gets dangerous. Blame shifting creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more they make you feel like the problem, the more you act like the problem, because you're constantly trying to fix yourself to earn their approval. Psychologically, blame shifting taps into a concept known as internalized guilt. When someone is repeatedly blamed for things they didn't do, they start to absorb that guilt, even when it's not justified. This is why so many people in relationships with narcissists find themselves constantly apologizing, sometimes even for things they didn't do. To counter this, you need to start questioning the narrative. When the narcissist blames you for something, take a step back and ask yourself, is this really my fault, or are they projecting their guilt onto me? Speaking of projection, narcissists are also experts at creating chaos to keep you off balance. This tactic is sometimes called crazy making because it leaves you feeling confused, anxious, and unsure of what's real. Narcissists thrive in chaotic environments because it gives them control. If you're constantly trying to put out fires, you don't have the time or energy to question their behavior or challenge their authority. The chaos can take many forms. It might be constant drama, unpredictable mood swings, or even manufactured crises designed to shift your focus away from their behavior. Think about it like this: the narcissist is the one spinning the plates, and you're the one running around trying to keep them from crashing. This chaotic environment creates a sense of learned helplessness, the psychological phenomenon where you stop trying to change your circumstances because you feel powerless to do so. It's the same concept we talked about earlier with Martin Seligman's experiments with dogs. In chaotic relationships with narcissists, you eventually stop trying to fix things because you've been conditioned to believe that no matter what you do, it won't make a difference. The way to break free from this chaos is to create your own stability. You can't control the narcissist's behavior, but you can control your response to it. Set routines, establish boundaries, and create a safe space, whether it's a physical space like a room in your house, or an emotional space like a support network of friends or a therapist where you can retreat when the chaos becomes too much. Stability is the antidote to the chaos that narcissists create. Another tactic narcissists use is withholding affection. This is a subtle but powerful form of control. In the beginning, they might shower you with love and attention, but over time, they'll start withdrawing that affection. It's not that they stop caring, they're using affection as a tool to control you. They'll give you just enough to keep you hooked, but not enough to make you feel secure. This creates a dynamic where you're constantly seeking their approval, trying to earn back the affection they once freely gave. Withholding affection taps into a psychological phenomenon known as intermittent reinforcement, the same principle that makes gambling so addictive. When rewards, in this case, affection, are given out unpredictably, it creates a stronger emotional attachment than if the rewards were given consistently. You become addicted to the highs and lows, always chasing that next moment of affection. The solution here is to stop seeking their approval. Easier said than done, I know, but once you stop relying on the narcissist for affection and validation, you take away their power to control you. Start focusing on self-love and building your self-esteem from within, rather than depending on external validation. Lastly, let's talk about silent treatment. When a narcissist feels threatened or doesn't get their way, they might resort to the silent treatment as a form of punishment. This tactic works because it taps into our natural fear of rejection and abandonment. The silent treatment is designed to make you feel invisible and unworthy of attention, triggering anxiety and self-doubt. In many ways, it's a form of emotional starvation. Humans are social beings, And when we're deprived of communication, it can feel like we're being cut off from the very thing that makes us human: connection. But here's the kicker: the silent treatment only works if you let it. The narcissist is banking on the fact that you'll come crawling back, desperate for any form of attention, even if it's negative. The way to counter this is to stop feeding into it. When they give you the silent treatment, use that time to focus on yourself. Engage in activities that bring you joy, connect with friends, or practice self-care. By not reacting to their punishment, you take away the power they have over you. Remember, the silent treatment is a manipulation tactic designed to make you feel small. Don't let it. So, we've now covered the full spectrum of tactics narcissists use to control you: isolation, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, triangulation, projection, emotional volatility, love bombing, financial control, future faking, blame shifting, creating chaos, withholding affection, and the silent treatment. These tactics are insidious because they're subtle, often disguised as love, concern, or protection. But now that you know what to look for, you're in a much stronger position to protect yourself. Here's the bottom line: narcissists can only control you if you let them. Their power comes from your emotional investment in them. The more you need their approval, the more control they have. But once you start setting boundaries, reclaiming your independence, and trusting your own reality, their grip on you weakens. You don't have to live in their web of manipulation. You have the power to break free. But now I want to leave you with one final thought. What would your life look like without the influence of a narcissist? Picture it. Imagine waking up each day feeling confident in your decisions, surrounded by people who genuinely support and care for you. That life is possible. It starts with recognizing the control tactics we've discussed and making the conscious choice to take your power back. You deserve to live a life free from manipulation and control. Now, it's time to take the first step: